The small town of Riverdale woke up to gray skies and light rain on that Tuesday morning. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until police cars and an ambulance rushed down Main Street, sirens blaring. People stepped out of shops, curious about what was happening. The vehicles turned onto Pine Avenue, heading toward the large brick house at the end of the street, the Collins family home. By noon, whispers began spreading through town. Mrs. Wilson at the grocery store heard it from her nephew, who worked as a paramedic. Soon everyone was talking about it. The unthinkable had happened. Thomas Collins and his twin daughters, Anna and Lisa, had all passed away on the same day. "It can't be true," said old Mr. Johnson, shaking his head as he stood outside the post office. "I just saw Thomas yesterday at the hardware store. He seemed perfectly fine." But it was true. As the hours passed, details trickled out. Thomas had been found in his home office, apparently from heart failure. The twins, who had just celebrated their 26th birthdays last month, were discovered in their childhood bedrooms. They had come home for what neighbors understood was a family meeting. Outside the Collins house, people gathered with flowers and candles. Susan Collins, Thomas's wife of 30 years, appeared briefly at the door, thanking everyone for coming. Her face was pale but strangely calm, her voice steady as she spoke. "My family would have been touched by your kindness," she said. "Please, respect our privacy during this difficult time." What struck many as odd was her composure. How could anyone remain so collected after losing a husband and both daughters in a single day? Some called it shock. Others whispered it was something else entirely. "She always was the strong one," Mrs. Peterson from next door told anyone who would listen. "But this is different. It's like she was prepared somehow." At the Riverdale diner, the usual lunch crowd could talk of nothing else. Thomas Collins had built his construction company from scratch, turning it into the biggest employer in town. His daughters had been the pride of Riverdale High School, identical in appearance but opposite in personality. Anna was just like her father, said Daisy, who had served the family breakfast every Sunday for years. Always talking business, always planning. Lisa was the quiet one, always with her nose in medical books. By evening, the town council had called an emergency meeting. Thomas had been set to break ground on a new community center next week. What would happen to that project now? What about the 20 families who depended on Collins construction for their livelihoods? Meanwhile, at the police station, Detective Richard Torres was reviewing the initial reports with a furrowed brow. 3 members of the same family, all on the same day, he muttered to his partner. And no signs of foul play? "The preliminary medical examination suggests heart failure for the father," his partner replied. "The daughters, well, we're still waiting on those results." Torres tapped his pen against his desk. "And they all just happened to die on the same day? That's one coincidence too many for me." As night fell over Riverdale, lights burned late in many homes. Parents held their children closer. Couples spoke in hushed tones. Everyone felt the same chill of unease. At the funeral home, Director Harold Barnes worked through the night, preparing for what would surely be the most talked-about service in town history. 3 caskets had been ordered. The local florist reported, selling out of white lilies. And at her kitchen table, Susan Collins sat alone, staring at an old family photograph. The twins smiled out from the frame, their father's hands resting proudly on their shoulders. Susan's fingers traced the edge of the picture, lingering on a detail no one else had noticed yet. A detail that would soon turn grief into something far more complicated. The phone rang, making her jump. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. "Hello?" She answered cautiously. The voice on the other end hesitated. "Mrs. Collins? There's something you need to know about what happened today." Everyone in Riverdale knew about Thomas Collins and his rise to success. He had started with just a pickup truck and a toolbox, taking small repair jobs around town. 25 years later, his company logo appeared on construction sites all over the county. "He never forgot where he came from," said Bill from the hardware store, nursing a coffee at the diner 2 days after the tragedy. Even when he became the big man in town, Thomas still came in himself to pick up supplies. Always had time for A chat. What fewer people knew was how hard those early years had been. Thomas and Susan had lived in a tiny apartment above the laundromat when they first married. Susan worked double shifts at the hospital, while Thomas took any job he could find. When she became pregnant with the twins, they barely had enough saved. For doctor visits, the old-timers remembered how Thomas had won his first big contract. The previous contractor had abandoned the job halfway through, leaving the town council desperate. Thomas promised to finish on time and under budget, a promise he kept by working 18-hour days for 3 months straight. That job nearly killed him, recalled Robert, who had been Thomas's first employee. But it put Collins Construction on the map. The twins arrived during that chaotic time. Anna was born 7 minutes before Lisa, and even as babies, their differences were clear. Anna cried loudly when she wanted attention, while Lisa would just stare with her big blue eyes until someone noticed her. As the girls grew, so did the business. By the time they started school, the family had moved into the brick house on Pine Avenue. Thomas built a swimming pool in the backyard and surprised Susan with a new car on their 10th anniversary. From the outside, they looked like the perfect family, but success came with its own problems. Thomas was rarely home, always chasing the next big project. The girls saw more of their babysitters than their father. When Thomas did come home, he often brought work with him, spreading blueprints across the dining table and talking on the phone through dinner. He missed Lisa's piano recital and Anna's soccer championship in the same month, said Carol, who had taught both girls in high school. Susan made excuses for him, but everyone could see the girls were hurt. The real trouble started when the twins turned 16. Anna began helping at the office after school, showing a natural talent for the business. Thomas boasted that she would take over the company someday. Meanwhile, Lisa announced she wanted to become a doctor. Thomas wasn't against Lisa's choice, Mom explained Pastor Wilson, who had counseled the family. He just couldn't understand why she wouldn't want what he had built. He took it personally. The next few years were tense. Lisa buried herself in studies, winning a scholarship to a medical school in the city. Anna stayed local, learning the construction business from the ground up. Family dinners became battlegrounds with Thomas and Anna on one side, Lisa on the other, and Susan desperately trying to keep peace. Then came the big falling out. No one knew exactly what happened, but Lisa stopped coming home for holidays. Anna would only say that her sister was being difficult. Thomas refused to mention Lisa's name at all. 3 years passed with the family divided. Then last month something changed. Thomas made a mysterious trip out of town and returned looking troubled. He called both daughters and asked them to come home for an important family meeting. He came to see me the day before they all died, Pastor Wilson said, his voice lowering. He told me he had made terrible mistakes that needed fixing. Said he had to set things right before it was too late. In the church office, Thomas had seemed nervous, constantly checking his phone. He mentioned needing to update his will and asked about forgiveness. "I've done things, Pastor," he had said, "things that might hurt the people I love most. If they knew." The pastor never found out what Thomas was going to confess. The next day, all 3 Collins were gone, leaving behind more questions than answers. At the police station, Detective Torres pinned 3 photos to his bulletin board. What connection was he missing? What secret had brought both twins home on that fatal day? And why had Susan Collins received a package from a lawyer's office the very morning her family died? Detective Richard Torres stood in Thomas Collins's home office, taking in every detail. The large mahogany desk was still cluttered with blueprints and contracts. A half-empty coffee mug sat next to the computer. Everything looked normal except for the man who had died in the leather chair just days ago. "Time of death?" Torres asked, turning to Dr. Patel, the medical examiner. "Between 9 and 11 a.m., preliminary cause appears to be cardiac arrest," she replied, closing her notebook. "The twins were found around the same time. I've never seen anything like it in 20 years on this job." Torres nodded slowly. 3 members of the same family, dying within hours of each other. The coincidence felt impossible. No signs of forced entry. Officer Chen reported, joining them. "Mrs. Collins says she was at her sister's house all morning. Came home around noon and found them. And she called 911 right away? Torres asked. Chen hesitated. Actually, no. Phone records show she waited almost 40 minutes. Back at the station, Torres spread the case files across his desk. The preliminary reports showed no obvious foul play. Thomas appeared to have died from heart failure. Lisa showed signs of the same. But Anna's case was different. No clear cause of death yet. 3 people don't just die like this, Torres muttered, rubbing his tired eyes. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Patel. Found something. Come to the lab. At the medical examiner's office, Dr. Patel looked troubled. I ran additional toxicology tests, she explained, pulling up results on her computer. Look at these levels. Torres leaned in, trying to make sense of the charts. Thomas and Lisa both had a genetic heart condition, Dr. Patel explained. It could cause sudden cardiac death, but Anna, she pointed to another screen. Anna had traces of a substance in her system. Not enough to kill, but enough to cause symptoms similar to heart failure. You're saying 2 died naturally, but 1 was helped along? Torres asked. I'm saying we need to look deeper, Dr. Patel replied. Torres's next stop was the Collins construction office. The staff moved around in a daze, answering phones and trying to keep the business running despite their grief. He was fine that morning, said Nancy, Thomas's assistant for 15 years. Busy, stressed maybe, but nothing unusual. Did he mention the family meeting with his daughters? Torres asked. Nancy looked surprised. Meeting? No. Actually, he canceled all his appointments for that day just the night before. Said he needed to handle a personal matter. Torres visited the local pharmacy next. The pharmacist confirmed that Lisa had picked up a prescription the day before she died, medication for anxiety. She seemed on edge, the pharmacist recalled. Kept checking her phone. Meanwhile, Officer Chen discovered something odd while reviewing the home security footage. The cameras around the Collins house were disabled for 2 hours that morning, he reported. Turned off from inside the house. Torres returned to the Collins home where Susan was sorting through family photographs. Mrs. Collins, I need to ask about the security system. Torres began carefully. Thomas was paranoid about security. Susan replied, not looking up from the photos. Always updating it. Do you know why the cameras were turned off that morning? Susan's hands froze over a family portrait. I didn't know they were. Torres studied her face. Mrs. Collins, did your husband have any enemies? Anyone who might want to harm him or your daughters? Susan finally met his eyes. Detective, my husband, built his success by stepping on others. He made plenty of enemies. Any specific threats recently? Susan hesitated. There was a letter. Thomas tried to hide it, but I found it in his desk last month. It said, "The truth always comes out." As Torres left the Collins house, his phone rang. It was the lab technician who had been examining Thomas's computer. Detective, you need to see this. There's an email thread between Thomas and someone using an encrypted account. Last message sent the day before he died. Torres headed back to the station, the case growing more complex by the hour. On his desk, he found an envelope from the county records office. Inside was a property deed he'd requested for a house 2 counties over purchased by Thomas Collins 5 years ago. The address was unfamiliar, but the name listed as co-owner made Torres sit up straight. It wasn't Susan Collins. It was a woman named Victoria Lawrence. Torres pulled out his phone and dialed a new number. This is Detective Torres from Riverdale PD. I need everything you have on Victoria Lawrence. Victoria Lawrence lived in a yellow house with blue shutters in a quiet neighborhood of Oakbrook, just 2 hours from Riverdale. Detective Torres parked his car across the street, observing the well-kept garden and children's bicycle on the front porch. This didn't look like the home of someone involved in suspicious deaths. He knocked on the door, badge ready. A woman in her early 40s answered, her confused expression changing to worry when she saw his badge. Victoria Lawrence? Torres asked. Yes, she replied, arms crossing defensively. What's this about? I'm investigating the deaths of Thomas Collins and his daughters. Your name came up in our investigation. The color drained from Victoria's face. You better come in. she said quietly. Inside, family photos covered the walls. Torres stopped, in front of one showing Victoria with a teenage boy. The boy's resemblance to Thomas Collins was unmistakable. "That's my son Jack," Victoria explained, following Torres's gaze. "He's 17 now, away at science camp." "And his father?" Torres asked, already knowing the answer. Victoria sank into a chair. "Thomas and I met 18 years ago at a construction conference in Chicago. I was an architect presenting designs.
He pursued me, told me his marriage was over in all but name."
She poured herself a glass of water with shaking hands. "By the time I discovered that was a lie, I was already pregnant. Thomas set us up here, paid for everything, visited when he could." "Does your son know about Thomas's other family?" Victoria nodded. "Jack found out last year. He was using Thomas's laptop and saw messages from the twins. He was devastated, angry that he'd been kept a secret." Torres made notes. "When did you last speak with Thomas?" 3 weeks ago. He called saying everything was about to change. He was planning to tell Susan and the twins about us, said he was tired of living a double life." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "Now he's gone and I don't know what happens to us." Back in Riverdale, Torres accessed Thomas Collins's bank records. The financial trail revealed monthly payments to Victoria going back 17 years. But there was more. Large sums transferred to offshore accounts over the past 6 months. Nearly $2 million gone. At the Collins construction office, Torres questioned Robert, Thomas's oldest friend and business partner. "Did you know Thomas was moving company money offshore?" Torres asked bluntly. Robert looked stunned. "What? No, that's impossible. The transfers came from accounts you both had access to." Robert shook his head. "Thomas was acting strange lately, jumpy, secretive. I assumed it was stress from the new development project. Or guilt," Torres suggested, "about his second family." Robert's shock seemed genuine. "Second family? What are you talking about?" Torres showed him a photo of Victoria and Jack. Robert stared in disbelief. "That boy looks just like him," he whispered. "All these years, and I never knew." Torres then visited Thomas's former secretary, who had retired last year after 20 years with the company. Thomas was always careful with his schedule, she recalled. Monthly business trips that followed. The same pattern. "Now I understand why." She hesitated before continuing. "There's something else. About 3 months ago, Thomas came to ask for my old files. He was looking for documents from a project 10 years back, the West Side Mall. Said it was urgent." "What was special about that project?" "Nothing officially. But there were rumors about shortcuts with materials, inspections that were rushed through. The mall had structural problems later." Torres's next stop was Susan Collins' sister, Marie, where Susan had supposedly been the morning of the deaths. "Yes, she was here," Marie confirmed. "Arrived around 8 a.m., left just after 11:30. "Did she seem worried? Anxious?" Marie considered the question. "Now that you mention it, she kept checking her phone. Said she was expecting an important call. Edio." The station that evening. Torres pieced together a troubling timeline. Thomas and the twins had died between 9 and 11 a.m. Susan had an alibi, but the 40-minute delay in calling 911 remained suspicious. The lab called with Anna's final toxicology report. The substance found wasn't poison. It was a rare medication that could trigger heart failure symptoms in someone with the family's genetic condition. Torres stared at the report, a theory forming. One of the twins might have discovered her father's secret life. Perhaps she'd confronted him, causing his fatal heart attack. But what about the other twin? And who had disabled the security cameras? His cell phone rang. An unknown number. "Detective." "Torres? This is Jack Lawrence. My mother said you visited today." "Yes, Jack. I'm sorry about your father." There was a pause. "There's something you should know. I was in Riverdale the day my father died. He asked me to come. Said it was time for all his children to meet." The Collins family home buzzed with activity 3 days after the tragedy. People moved in and out carrying flowers, food, and black clothing. In the living room, Susan sat with a funeral director, going through photographs for the memorial service. "We'll need 3 separate photo displays," Susan explained, her voice steady. "Thomas enjoyed fishing, so include those lake pictures. Anna loved horses, and Lisa was proud of her medical school graduation." The funeral director nodded, making notes. "And for the caskets, open or closed?" Susan didn't hesitate. "Closed, for all 3. In the kitchen, Marie arranged food brought by neighbors while watching her sister with worried eyes. "She hasn't cried once," Marie whispered to Pastor Wilson. "Not a single tear." "Everyone grieves differently," the pastor replied, though his brow furrowed with concern. The doorbell rang. A tall, gray-haired woman stood on the porch, her face a mirror image of Thomas's. "Catherine," Susan said, stepping back. "I didn't expect you until tomorrow." "I caught an earlier flight," Catherine replied, studying her sister-in-law's face. "We need to talk, privately." The 2 women disappeared into Thomas's office. Their voices soon rose, though the words remained muffled. "What's going on in there?" Marie wondered, pausing near the door. Moments later, Catherine emerged alone, her face tight with anger. She marched upstairs to the twins' rooms where personal items were being gathered for the memorial. Susan followed quickly behind. "Don't touch anything in those rooms," Catherine demanded. "Not until I've had a chance to look through everything." "This is my house," Susan responded coldly. "You have no right." "I have every right," Catherine interrupted. "Those girls were my nieces, and my brother—" Her voice broke. "Thomas would want me to make sure everything is done properly." Detective Torres arrived as the argument escalated. He had come with more questions, but found himself playing peacekeeper instead. "Mrs. Collins," he said, pulling Susan aside, "we found something in your husband's office safe." He held up a sealed envelope with, "For Catherine in case of emergency," written across it. Susan's face paled. "That should have been destroyed." Catherine snatched the envelope. "What have you been hiding, Susan?" Before she could open it, Susan's lawyer arrived, a thin man with glasses and a permanent frown. "I advise everyone to calm down," he announced. "The funeral is tomorrow. Legal matters can wait." Catherine tucked the envelope into her purse. "I want a private viewing of the bodies before the service." Susan's lawyer stepped between them. "That won't be possible. The caskets have been sealed, at Mrs. Collins's request." "Why?" Catherine demanded. "What are you hiding?" Torres watched this exchange with growing suspicion. Later, in the twins' rooms, he noticed something odd. While Lisa's room remained untouched, medical textbooks stacked, neatly bed perfectly made, Anna's room showed signs of hasty packing. Drawers were half empty and the closet had been partially cleared out. Was someone planning a trip? Torres asked Susan. Anna was considering moving to the city. Susan replied too quickly. She'd been packing gradually. Meanwhile, at the funeral home, final preparations were underway. 3 identical caskets had been delivered, lined with white satin. The funeral director received strict instructions. No one was to open them under any circumstances. That evening, Torres reviewed the case in his apartment. Jack Lawrence's statement had added a new dimension. The boy claimed Thomas had invited him to Riverdale to meet his half-sisters. But according to Jack, when he arrived at the designated meeting spot, a coffee shop downtown, only Anna had shown up. She already knew about me, Jack had told Torres. She'd hired a private investigator, months ago, found out everything. Torres stared at the crime scene photos, focusing on a detail he'd missed before. In Thomas's hand was a crumpled note with a partial phone number, the same number Jack Lawrence had called from. His phone rang. It was Dr. Patel. I've been reviewing the autopsy reports, she said, her voice tense. Something isn't right. The body identified as Anna Collins. There's a discrepancy in the dental records. Torres sat up straight. What kind of discrepancy? The records from her dentist don't match the body we examined. Either the records are wrong, or that's not Anna Collins, Torres finished. Across town. Catherine sat alone in her hotel room, finally opening the envelope from Thomas's safe. Inside was a handwritten letter. As she read, her hand flew to her mouth in shock. At the Collins house, Susan finished her final preparations. 3 framed photographs stood ready for the funeral: Thomas, Lisa, and Anna. She touched Anna's picture, her finger tracing the outline of her daughter's face. "Almost done," she whispered. "Just one more day." The phone in her pocket vibrated. An unknown number. Susan answered cautiously. "It's done," said a woman's voice, a voice that shouldn't have been possible. "I'm safe. No one followed me." Susan closed her eyes in relief. "Good. Stay hidden until I can join you." "What about Aunt Catherine? She suspects something." "Don't worry," Susan replied, looking toward the staircase where Thomas's sister had argued with her hours earlier. "I'll handle Catherine. Nothing will stop us now." Gray clouds hung low over Riverdale on the morning of the funeral. A cold wind scattered fallen leaves across the church parking lot as cars arrived one by one. People spoke in hushed tones, nodding solemnly to each other as they entered the white wooden church that had stood in the center of town for over a century. Inside, 3 closed caskets rested at the front, each topped with a different arrangement of flowers. White lilies for Thomas, pink roses for Lisa, and sunflowers for Anna. Large photographs stood on easels beside each casket: Thomas in his fishing gear, Lisa in her white doctor's coat, and Anna smiling in front of a construction site. Susan Collins sat in the front row, dressed in black, her face hidden behind a dark veil. Next to her sat Marie, who kept a protective arm around her sister's shoulders. On the other side of the church, Catherine took her seat, her eyes never leaving the caskets. Detective Torres slipped in quietly, choosing a spot near the back where he could watch everyone. "We gather today to remember 3 beloved members of our community," Pastor Wilson began, his voice echoing through the packed church. "A father and his 2 daughters taken from us too soon." As the service continued, friends and colleagues shared memories. Robert spoke of Thomas's determination and vision. Lisa's medical school roommate recalled her kindness to patients. Anna's high school teacher described her competitive spirit and leadership. From his position at the back, Torres noticed something strange. While many people cried during stories about Thomas and Lisa, the memories of Anna brought only tight smiles and nervous glances. It was as if the town shared a collective uncertainty about her. When it was Susan's turn to speak, she walked to the podium with steady steps. "My husband built things," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. "Buildings, bridges, a company. But his greatest creations were our daughters. They were his pride, his legacy." She paused, looking directly at Catherine. "No matter what secrets come to light today or tomorrow, nothing can change that." Catherine shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her hand touching the letter in her purse. As Susan returned to her seat, Pastor Wilson invited everyone to bow their heads in prayer. In the moment of silence that followed, Catherine suddenly stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I can't do this," she announced, walking toward the caskets. "We can't say goodbye without knowing the truth." Susan rose quickly. "Catherine, don't—" But Thomas's sister had already reached Anna's casket. "Open it," she demanded, turning to the funeral director. A shocked murmur rippled through the congregation. "That's inappropriate," Susan's lawyer protested, hurrying forward. "What's inappropriate is lying to everyone here," Catherine shot back. She pulled the letter from her purse. "My brother wrote to me before he died. He knew his life was in danger." The funeral director looked helplessly between the 2 women. Detective Torres moved to the front of the church. "Mrs. Collins," he said quietly to Susan, "is there something you want to tell us before this goes any further?" Susan's composure finally cracked. "You don't understand. None of you do." From the back of the church, a young man Torres recognized as Jack Lawrence watched with wide eyes. Next to him stood Victoria, her hand gripping her son's arm tightly. "Open the casket," Torres instructed the funeral director. With shaking hands, the director unlatched Anna's casket and slowly raised the lid. A collective gasp filled the church. The casket was empty except for some weighted sandbags. "Where is she?" Catherine demanded, turning to Susan. "Where is Anna?" All eyes turned to Susan, who had removed her veil and stood tall despite the accusation in every face. "My daughter is safe," she said firmly. "That's all that matters now." Torres's phone buzzed in his pocket. He checked it quickly, then looked up at Susan with new understanding. "Airport security just sent me this footage," he said, holding up his phone to show her. The screen displayed a young woman with dyed hair and glasses boarding a plane. Despite the disguise, the resemblance to the photo of Anna was unmistakable. "Flight to Rio de Janeiro," Torres continued. "Booked under the name Helena Wright, left early this morning." Lisa's medical school roommate stepped forward suddenly. "That's why she asked me for those pills," she whispered. "Anna said her sister needed them for anxiety, but they could trigger heart failure symptoms in someone with a family condition." The pieces were falling into place. Torres turned to address everyone. "I believe Anna Collins discovered her father's secret life, his second family. She confronted him that morning, which triggered his fatal heart attack. When Lisa arrived for the family meeting and found her father dead, Anna panicked." Susan shook her head, tears finally streaming down her face. "You don't understand. Lisa found them both. Anna trying to revive Thomas. She thought Anna had killed him. They fought." A heavy silence fell over the church as everyone grasped what Susan was saying. "Lisa had the same heart condition as her father," Torres finished quietly. "The struggle triggered her attack. By the time Anna realized what was happening, it was too late." Catherine sank into a nearby chair. "And you helped her escape," she said to Susan. "You helped her run away rather than face what she'd done." Susan looked around at the shocked faces of friends and neighbors. "What would you have done?" she asked. "I'd already lost my husband and one daughter. Should I have lost Anna too? Over an accident?" As the murmurs grew louder, Torres noticed something. A small nod between Jack Lawrence and Susan. The boy knew something. Had he been part of Anna's escape plan? Pastor Wilson tried to regain control of the service, but it was too late. The funeral had become something else entirely, a revelation, a reckoning. The secrets Thomas Collins had kept in life had now been exposed in death. And somewhere far away, Anna Collins was starting a new life, unaware that back in Riverdale, her carefully planned escape had just been discovered. 1 month after the disastrous funeral, Detective Torres sat at his desk reviewing the Collins case file one last time. The paperwork was nearly complete. Thomas and Lisa's death certificates listed natural causes, a genetic heart condition that neither had known about until it was too late. Anna Collins was officially listed as a missing person, though everyone in town knew the truth by now. Torres closed the folder with a sigh. The district attorney had decided not to pursue charges against Susan. Without Anna's testimony, they couldn't prove what really happened that morning in the Collins house. And many in town silently agreed with Susan's choice to protect her remaining daughter. "Heading home?" Officer Chen asked, stopping by Torres's desk. "Almost. Just waiting for one last piece to this puzzle." His computer pinged with a new email. It was from his contact at the Brazilian Police Department, with an attachment labeled "Surveillance Footage, Rio Airport." Torres opened the video file. The timestamp showed a date 3 days ago. A young woman with short black hair moved through the crowded terminal, occasionally glancing over her shoulder. Despite the new haircut and different clothes, Torres recognized Anna Collins immediately. "She's on the move again," he murmured. His phone rang. "Susan Collins." "Detective," she said without greeting. "I assume you've seen the footage from Rio." Torres wasn't surprised she knew about it. "Your daughter is running out of places to hide, Mrs. Collins. It would be better if she came home, faced what happened." "She's just a girl who made a terrible mistake," Susan replied. "She never meant for any of this to happen." After hanging up, Torres drove to the cemetery. The town had mostly returned to normal, but the ripple effects of the Collins tragedy continued. Collins Construction had been sold to a company from the city. The brick house on Pine Avenue stood empty, with a for sale sign in the front yard. Susan had moved away last week, telling neighbors she needed a fresh start. At the cemetery, Torres wasn't surprised to find Jack Lawrence standing between the graves of Thomas and Lisa Collins. The boy had his father's build and eyes. "I got your message," Torres said, approaching slowly. "You wanted to talk?" Jack nodded, his young face serious beyond his years. "I need to tell you what really happened. I owe it to Lisa." Torres waited, silently. "Anna didn't just discover my existence by accident," Jack began. "She found documents at the construction office, proof that Dad had been stealing from his own company for years, setting up accounts for me and Mom. When she confronted him, he admitted everything. About us, about the stolen money." Jack's voice trembled. "Dad promised to make it right. He was going to tell everyone the truth, set up a trust fund for me from his legitimate assets. That's why he called the family meeting." "But something went wrong," Torres prompted. "Anna arrived early that morning. She and Dad argued. His heart couldn't take it." Jack paused, eyes filling with tears. "When Lisa arrived and found Dad dead, she blamed Anna. They fought over Dad's phone. Lisa wanted to call 911 right away, but Anna needed time to think." Torres filled in the rest. "During the struggle, Lisa had a heart attack too. Same condition as your father." Jack nodded miserably. "Anna called me in a panic. I was waiting at the coffee shop downtown. By the time I got to the house, it was too late for both of them. So you helped Anna fake her death and escape," Torres concluded. "We didn't know what else to do. It was an accident, but who would believe that 2 people dead and Anna looking guilty of both?" Jack wiped his eyes. "We used Lisa's medical knowledge. Made it look like Anna had died too." Torres thought about the empty casket, the confused timeline, the disabled security cameras. "And Susan? She found us with the bodies. She could have called the police right then, but..." Jack hesitated. "She looked at me and saw Dad. She made a choice to protect both of us." Behind them, fallen leaves scattered in the wind. 2 fresh graves and an empty casket, Torres thought. 3 lives ended in different ways. "Where is she now?" Torres asked. The real truth this time. Jack's face closed off. "I don't know." But Torres had been a detective long enough to recognize a lie. He handed Jack his card. "When you talk to her next, tell her I'm willing to listen. The full story might help her case." As Torres walked back to his car, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. He opened it to find a photo of a small cafe somewhere tropical. Sitting at a corner table was Anna Collins, looking directly at the camera. The message read, "Some secrets are meant to stay buried, but the truth always finds a way out. I'm ready to tell my side of the story. 1 week." Torres looked back at the cemetery, where Jack still stood between the graves. In trying to protect the people they loved, the Collins family had created a web of secrets that ultimately destroyed them. Now only Anna and the truth remained, both hiding in plain sight, waiting to be discovered. He typed a quick reply. "I'll be waiting." In Riverdale, life would go on. The brick house would find new owners. Collins Construction would build new projects under a different name. But the story of the father and twin daughters who died on the same day would never be forgotten. And the shocking detail revealed at the funeral, an empty casket and a daughter on the run, was just the beginning of a truth that was still unfolding, one secret at a time.